one of the areas that we've had a ton of success with is AI powered email personalization. Um, we improved conversion rates by 82% after we started taking behavioral data. We saw the data about LinkedIn post citations, and we decided to test it by publishing a series of articles under employee or on employee profiles. That some of them were explicitly about the product, some of them were more classic. What is how do you do email marketing successfully in 2025 with mentions of the product? Um, and it didn't work at all.
Hi everyone, welcome back to Demand Decoded. Dan here as usual, and this is one, a weird intro, two, an amazing episode, and three, recorded after the episode. So I've got a bit of insight on what you're about to hear, and this was a really special episode. We had Asia Frost from HubSpot on, who is Senior Director of Global Growth and Paid at HubSpot. You've probably heard Asia speaking more recently at Inbound, on podcasts, and really speaking about HubSpot's new Loop marketing playbook, but also an expert fundamentally on AEO and is really insightful on some of the things they're doing at HubSpot and the success they're having around AEO and AI implementation in marketing too. And yeah, I'm recording this after the episode. So what I would say is this is a extremely actionable episode. Like there is little theory here that doesn't have anything backed up by practical applications in a marketing sense. And whilst we touched on the Loop framework that HubSpot have come out with, and we think there are some real legs in that. And actually, when you start to understand the framework deeply and what the purpose of each stage is and how you truly implement that in your business, you really see how this thing comes to life and how you can use it for your go-to-market strategy. Aside from that, we dug into real examples of what they're doing at HubSpot for AI email personalization to improve conversion rates by 82%, and also some real examples of what they're doing for AEO. And Asia shared her screen, like showed us some pages. We weren't expecting that, but there was just this flowed really nicely. We had some just real brilliant conversations, ideas, and practical use cases that Asia is implementing for HubSpot right now. So yeah, it was a really, really awesome episode, and I hope you guys enjoy it. Before we get into the podcast today, here's a quick word from our sponsors, HubSpot. Think about listening to this podcast right now. You're probably multitasking and catching 70, maybe 80% of it. Now flip that and imagine only catching 20%. That'd be pretty crazy, right? Yet most businesses only use 20% of their data. All the important details in call logs, emails, and chats just left floating in digital space. HubSpot gives you access to those insights to help your business grow, because when you know more, you grow more. Visit HubSpot.com to get the full picture today. Phil and I, we've talked quite a lot about the loop and have some interesting observations. And yeah, it's very different to the way that you guys would frame inbound marketing. And like, we're going to dig into some of that hopefully, and like some of the intentional choices that have obviously been made along the way, etc., etc. And then hopefully, because AEO is such a big part of the loop, we feel
Mhm.
we can dive in a little bit deeper into that.
Yeah, that all sounds great. Let's do it.
All right, awesome. Actually, the place where we really wanted to start though, Asia, was your journey at HubSpot, because I was checking out LinkedIn and you've actually done 10 different roles at HubSpot, which must be some sort of record in the business. But it's quite amazing, right? Like you started as a content strategist, worked your way up to, senior SEO strategist, director of English growth, and now you find yourself in senior director of global growth and paid. But it feels like you've become like more visible as a person in HubSpot as well. And I mean, yeah, it's an incredible journey. It'd be interesting to hear how your time at HubSpot has evolved and what you're doing now.
Yeah, yeah. No, it has certainly been a journey. When I graduated college, I'd actually built a very successful freelance content business, and I had a little bit of it felt like two paths in the road. Do I keep building this agency? Do I hire people under me? Do I go deep there? Or do I maybe take a little bit of a demotion from a pay and autonomy perspective, but like go work at one of the best companies in the world from a marketing perspective and try to really learn and then figure out which area of marketing I might want to move into next. And obviously I chose the former path. And I have to say, like, thank you to my former self. I don't think I could have picked a better company to start. The same I have had about a new job every year, which is pretty funny. I also feel like HubSpot has become a new company every few years, and the introduction of the loop and this new framework for how we're thinking about marketing is very in line with the way HubSpot has really consistently, I think, identified what is changing in the world around us and then figured out, okay, what does that mean for the company's strategy? What does that mean for our customers' strategy? What does that mean for the platform strategy? And how do we unite all of those things? That's a question that, there's no permanent answer to. It keeps evolving. And it has been so incredible to do that alongside the company. Um, I certainly have, I think, been doing more uh, speaking and thought leadership. Um, I'd had a period a few years ago where I did a lot of that and I got totally burnt out. I'm sure both of you can relate to that. You get really excited, you do some conferences, those lead to more conferences, and then all of a sudden you're thinking, "Oh my god, my other work, my real work, when do I have time for that?" So I took a bit of a breather. But there's so much to say about the Loop and AEO that it really is, I think, just as important as my more traditional responsibilities right now. And so I've really been trying to lean into that.
Mm.
Can you remember much about what it was like when the need for the loop, first started to come to the minds of you and the people you were working with on it? I'm sure Kip was involved and Kieran too. Obviously it's a huge evolution of how businesses go to market. What were some of the sort of moments and feelings as that became obvious that this was going to be, we needed to create something here?
I remember it very well because I would say the overarching feeling at the time was anxiety. Uh, we we started to see AI overviews siphon
Yeah.
traffic from our blog, traffic that was very high quality and high intent that was a major part of our demand engine. And I could explain it, sometimes I think as marketers, what is really anxiety producing is what's happening, but you don't know why. We knew what was happening and why. And so we at least had that, but we had to figure out what to do next. And I think that goes back to the our strategy and our company's strategy and our customer strategy, like it's all incredibly intertwined. There's some real meta layers to being in marketing at HubSpot. Um, and so I was anxious not just for us, but because I knew that we were going to feel first what our customers would feel next.
Yeah.
Like this was hitting us first and hardest because we had built such an incredible inbound search engine over the past, 15 years, but our customers had really followed that model too. And so we had a lot of conversations about, okay, from a strategic perspective, how are we responding? A lot of the bets that we had set into motion years before, we were like, okay, those are turning out to be the right bets. We really invested in YouTube and human first
Yeah.
channels, and while we were seeing declines on the blog, we're seeing those channels start to
Mm.
really skyrocket. but we knew that it was more than just that strategic perspective that we needed. We needed a way to really approach marketing, a framework for approaching marketing that was going to be much more sustainable and relevant in a world where people aren't just coming to the blog, downloading an ebook, and becoming a lead anymore.
Yeah, it's I think it's an incredible point in time because amongst other things, AI has come along and has simultaneously disrupted how buyers buy, how buyers research, find, and consume information, and how that information is created. And so, both sides of the table have been upturned simultaneously, meaning it was really time for something broad and new to come in. And your point about the fact that these things hit HubSpot first, and then you make it part of your duty to figure that out, work out a response, and share that with your current and future customers, I think is one of the many reasons that HubSpot's such a great company. So yeah, on behalf of everybody, thank you for that.
Well, I think it's always been part of the company brand and the company commitment. And if our customers don't succeed in the long run, we will not have a sustainable company. So it's also in our best interests to make sure that our companies or that our customers can keep finding and growing sustainable sources of demand, because that's how and why they will keep using HubSpot.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
Like Phil and I spoke to Carl Denhoff on the podcast, who was brilliant to really dive into B2B media. And there's similar references you're making now. Like that was right after the famous graph of HubSpot's blog was going like round the whole internet, and like we were just asking him around that, and it was really funny. And yeah, you're kind of saying similar things around how we were like, at HubSpot, well, we don't really care. We're seeing these things, we're adjusting our strategy to it, but we invested in these changes 2, 3, 5 years ago, when we acquired the hustle. So that was all really cool. Um, I think it would be really good to actually just outline what the loop is, the 4 stages. How would you describe it to the audience?
Yeah. I think I want to start by clearing up maybe a misconception. Um, the loop doesn't replace inbound. I think the loop builds on inbound. And the reason I want to start with that is because um, I, I I I hear from marketers, oh, does this mean that I have to change everything about what I'm doing? Or is investing in this new strategy going to mean that I face declines from traditional channels? There's still demand in those
Mm.
left. And the answer is not at all. All the fundamentals of inbound around creating high quality, relevant content, being audience and customer first, those are still very applicable to the loop. But the mechanisms at which you're reaching your customers have evolved quite a bit. So, Dan, you already called out another key part about the loop. It is a 4-phase growth marketing playbook for the AI era. And kind of like asking someone, like what horoscope sign they are. I do always love asking people what their favorite phase of the loop is, because it's pretty revealing. So I do want to hear from both of you your favorites. Um, but the 4 phases are express, tailor, amplify, and evolve. And each of those phases is designed to basically build on the next. So in Express, you start by defining your ICP and really defining like your brand style and guidelines. In Tailor, then you personalize to that ICP, that persona. And Amplify, you distribute your content through trusted sources. And then Evolve, you're taking the learnings, the data from phases 1 through 3, and evolving on your content and your strategy so that you can restart the loop smarter. So, to turn the hot seat back to you, Do any of those, phases resonate more with you, or do you feel like, "Oh, yes, like, that is the one that we really need to be leaning into?"
Go on, Phil. Do you want to go first?
Well, do you know what? I find it very hard to choose because I get a lot from all of them, but I'm going to say evolve.
Mm,
Um, and it was a hard choice between evolve and express, but I've got a feeling that my co-host here will talk about express potentially, but I evolve because I'm very much a scientist at heart. Came into marketing from engineering, roles, jobs, scientific background. The data that drives the decision making has always been of so much interest to me.
mhm.
But it has been painful and hard to actually get good data that is actionable.
Yeah.
And this era of change is bringing in, renewed focus on the importance of it, like meaning
Mhm.
renewed commitment to resolving those problems, those gaps that exist, but also new tools and solutions for doing it because the scale of the problem had become quite large, quite unmanageable. But I always want to be able to make recommendations about how we and how clients go to market based on data that's usually there somewhere in their stack, in their ecosystem, but accessing it, understanding it, and aligning with everything else has been a bit of a challenge. So, yeah, the fact that we end up there pleases me because I always want to be able to bring data and evidence back to the table to plan the next phase, if you like. So, yeah, I'm
Yeah.
a I'm an evolve now.
I love this approach. Like this is really good. Phil obviously knows me very well, and I've spoken about this thing. Like express is probably not the word I would typically use to describe it, but it is definitely
Mm,
a word to describe it. Which is understanding your audience and your
mhm.
customers and your buyers deeply before you do anything. Like
Mhm.
before you do absolutely anything in marketing, that is so critical to, you know, the content you create, the channels that you use, the messages that you distribute, like the budgets that you have, everything that you do is always revolved around how you as a business express yourself to the market. So I think if you don't have that and you dive into any of the other things before it, you're kind of screwed.
Yeah. I love both of those answers. I mean, there truly is no wrong answer, but I think, Phil, to your choice, having a test, learn, iterate approach is it's always important to good marketing, but it is especially critical right now when things are changing so quickly and something that worked 2 months ago might not work now, something that didn't work might work. And so being really adaptable and constantly taking in new data and looking for ways to get that data quickly as opposed to in these, 6-month cycles, so important. That's absolutely something that we have been really leaning into at HubSpot, and I can give a few examples of how we're implementing all of this if it's helpful. Um, and Dan, to your point around understanding the customer, yeah, I sometimes I have conversations with customers where I say, okay, and like, what are your persona's main pain points? And they're like, well, we think XYZ. And I'm like, no, no, no. There should be no thinking. There should be nothing but knowing at this stage. And I think it's easier to do than ever before because we have new tools that allow you to, take all of your sales calls from the past 2 months, throw it into a Claude project and ask Claude to summarize the top themes. There's just so much that allows you to get closer to your customers than I think we ever have been able to get.
Yeah,
Yeah.
completely. We share that sort of concern that the knowledge of your ICP isn't a negotiable. It's kind of critical. And to Dan's point, Express is such an important part of the process, the framework for us, and it's the reason we're here doing this. In fact, because we believe that we know our ICP and we want to create content in forms and formats that help them, and we also enjoy doing it. And this is pretty far removed from where AI starts to come into the mix. This is the human-centric content, but it's how we enable ourselves to make use of those tools and leverage them further down the workflow. So, yeah, this is a very good example of why Express is such a such a liked part of the framework for us, um, as are they all. So we do definitely want to get into examples of how you are applying them, because I think that will be
Yeah.
very, very useful for listeners.
Yeah. So, for experiment specifically, this is a very tactical example, but we've implemented a bunch of cross-functional pods, and obviously, at a bigger company, you need to be cross-functional, or you need to have systems for cross-functional collaboration. Um, Otherwise, it's very easy for teams to just get heads down in
Mm,
their workloads and never talk to each other. But we set up a bunch of pods that are aimed at experimentation and quick learning. So each pod has a series of hypotheses that they want to test. For example, can we scale AEO to be 10x the channel that it currently is for HubSpot? Or can we reimagine paid in a world where people don't use the internet the same way? I
Mm.
guess they range from hypotheses to vision bets, but we try to get down to like when we're thinking about these 2 week sprints, like very tactical things that we can test.
mm.
And then the pod goes out. They're usually folks, again, from across different teams. They all have domain expertise and autonomy in their lanes. They run experiments, they come back, they share their learnings, and then we collectively decide the next set of things to do. And what's really cool about the experimentation centric approach, beyond the fact that we're learning so much, is that we have sign off at the highest levels of the company to fail. Like, I was on a call with, Yamini yesterday, and she said, "If this doesn't work, we'll figure it out, we'll move on." What we can't do, what true failure is spending too much time trying to make something work after we've gotten the early signals that it won't. So there's truly this scientist mindset percolating throughout the company right now, and it's really invigorating, and I think it's really valuable.
Oh, love that. I mean, I feel empowered just listening to that. Like, I think, and I posted about this on LinkedIn earlier, which is AEO in particular as a channel requires a lot of volume and a lot of testing in order to figure out what's working. I think that's true of most new channels, right? We're all trying to figure this out at the moment. I'd like to think HubSpot are probably 10 steps ahead of other businesses because for some reason you guys are always first. But yeah, like that mindset fuels the loop by the sound of things. Like that testing, that you know yeah, that mindset of not being afraid to fail is part of the loop.
It,
Yeah, yeah.
that is good. That is good, because it does need to be, like you say, and it is reassuring. And I think to your point, Dan, there's less and less concentration around any individual place or phrase or piece of content in the buyer's journey to finding the right solution these days. And so you do have to be able to spread your message more more efficiently and with more greater agility across a wider range of places where your buyers are. So that is changing the game for marketers quite significantly.
Yes, absolutely. I think it's still key to you don't want to spread your efforts too thin. And so I think for every business, what we have done is we've said, okay, there are a few channels that we believe we can execute with excellence on, and our and Growth Gabby, our persona, hangs out. And like those are going to be really important scaling channels for us. YouTube, newsletters, um, answer engines. Those are very important channels. But there are other channels where there are strategic omissions for us because even, we have 9,000 plus employees, we have a lot of resources, but we have to make sizable bets to win.
Yeah.
Uh, and so I would encourage the folks listening to be really intentional. And I think it goes back to express, to knowing your persona, like what is going to have the most resonance with that persona. How can I get early signal? And once I have that signal, can I double down here
Yeah.
and make a sizable investment?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Or can I turn it off, right? And not have judgment and, fear that marketing fail. And
Yeah.
that's the real thing amongst marketers, right? That we don't want to fail, and the fear of failure is huge.
We've
We
Yeah.
talked about that quite a few times and for quite a
Yeah.
while now. That it does frustrate us how hard it can be for marketing teams to feel like they're able to actually deactivate things that aren't working out for them. And we've encouraged people to look really hard at what is working so that
Yes.
they can demonstrate foundations upon which they can experiment and most likely fail quite frequently, quite quickly, but not feel like they've got to hold on to every single bet in the hopes that
Yes.
it one day pays off. So we're big fans of that mentality.
Yeah. And I Dan, as you pointed out, I've had many different titles at HubSpot. I have uh consistently gotten, trying to say this in a way that doesn't sound, maybe I'll approach it from a different angle. I have had a lot of bets that haven't worked out, and that has not inhibited my success at HubSpot because it it's a learning centric company, and I think I have made the calls with enough, in a short enough time period, and then have the here's what we do next. And I think
Yeah.
that's the most important thing. And if you aren't failing, this is tired and it's kind of cliche, but like if you're not failing, you're not making big enough bets, you're not trying enough new things.
Mm, love that mindset. Most businesses don't realize just how much their website is holding them back. VDOT were generating strong demand, but their site just wasn't converting it. We rebuilt their site with their buyers in mind, sharpened the user experience, and aligned it to their goals. And within 90 days after launch, high intent conversions increased by 100%, and demo requests rose by 14%. That's what happens when your website finally works as hard as your marketing. If you think your website might be holding you back, let's start the conversation at blendb2b.com. If you're enjoying this show, let me recommend another one from the HubSpot podcast network that I personally never miss. Nudge, hosted by Phil Agnew. What I love about Nudge is that it's all about the psychology and science behind human behavior. What makes us take action, form habits, or say yes. And then it shows how those same principles shape great marketing and sales. In one episode, Phil looks at how just 3 words in a text message boosted vaccination rates and may have saved hundreds of lives. That's the endowment effect at work, a tiny psychological nudge creating a huge outcome. Every episode of Nudge is about 20 minutes, fast paced, no fluff, and packed with ideas you can actually use. Check it out. Nudge is available wherever you get your podcast. To bring us back to the loop, love that little segue. I've got an interesting observation. I think Phil shares this as well, which is like the contrast between the loop and the inbound marketing playbook. Because the inbound marketing playbook basically taught people how to go about doing marketing. You would
Hmm.
write this content in this particular way. You would get them to download this piece of content, and doing so, you send them to a landing page. You do this. You send them 5 emails afterwards, etc., etc. It was a layered approach. The loop to us, and I think, Phil, you would agree, it is more of a behavioral
Yes.
approach
Yeah.
to marketing rather than a step-by-step playbook. That's
Yeah.
the way it feels.
I think that's spot on.
And is
It's a
that
framework.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And I think that that's intentional because I think we need more flexibility given how the buyer journey has fragmented, and given, the nuances and idiosyncrasies of every company's ICP and how that ICP is now discovering them. And so I think that the journey that the average customer takes to discover, evaluate, and decide to try or buy a product or service is so much more complex than it used to be. If we tried to give everyone a linear playbook, it would either be so generic that it wouldn't be valuable, or be so specific that it wouldn't be valuable.
Mm.
And so instead we need to give folks the framework for figuring out, okay, what is our marketing strategy?
Yeah, that's how we've been thinking about it too. So that's really great to hear. We think that businesses need the freedom to apply the loop the way that makes sense for them, the channels, the content formats, the places that their buyers are available and accessible to them. And in order
Mhm.
to succeed with the loop, you've still got to have a strategy to which it's applied,
Yes.
i.e., know your ICP, know your value proposition, know where you're going to go, know what your message is going to be there, and all of those things. And the loop, out of necessity, as you've said, is behaviors that you apply consistently as you do those, as you execute that strategy.
Mhm.
So that's really good thing. And as a result, it isn't necessary, I don't think, to try to think of the loop as four things that you do in order. You do them anytime you're performing an exercise that requires them. I struggled initially with the ordering of tailor and amplify, you see.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and sounds like that's a not a new challenge to you.
I think when we were initially walking through this, it and codifying it, it was an area of some debate. And what we realized we were getting caught up in is the old linear funnel way of thinking, where those steps would be reversed. But to your point, it's no longer a linear funnel. Um, and so yeah, I think that the best way to think about it is the loop is something you are always doing. So you are taking content that you've already created, you're personalizing it, you're distributing it, you're building on it, you're getting to better know your persona, tweaking it, personalizing it. And so once you get used to that more flowing, less, X, Y, Z, and then you're done, I think the more comfortable and right, appropriate it feels.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I initially sort of like wrestled with that point, and then I thought, no, it doesn't matter actually because these are not things I do in order. These are things I do all the time when I'm doing what I'm doing. And when we say tailor, when we say personalize, I think a lot of people's minds goes to not quite personalization of old, just inserting first name, but nevertheless personalizing to known contacts.
Mhm,
But before you can have a known contact, you need to be able to reach your audience and engage them. And quite a lot of the time, they'll remain anonymous to you anyway. But for me, tailoring is tailoring to the channel, tailoring
mhm.
to the segment, tailoring to the problem you solve. There's many ways to think about what tailoring your content means, and it's all necessary in order to reach.
Yes, and I do think that there will be differences by channel. One of the areas that we've had a ton of success with is AI-powered email personalization. Um, we improved conversion rates by 82% after we, started, taking behavioral data, like what pages a contact was looking at, what contact or what content they downloaded, how they describe their business on their website. So that behavioral and then uh, data that we got by looking at their website and data that they had shared with us.
Yeah,
And then we created emails that really could only have been for that specific contact using Gen AI and that information, and conversion rates have soared. So that's an example of a tactic that lives in Taylor. But I think to your point, it also looks like, okay, my persona spends a lot of time on Reddit in these specific subreddits. And so I'm going to establish a presence in those specific subreddits. And the way that I engage on those subreddits is going to look very different from how my brand might engage on, say, LinkedIn or Instagram, where the rules of engagement are different and people are looking for different types of content.
yeah,
Mm.
absolutely.
As the podcasters say, double click on something. I don't know.
Let's double click.
Let The email one is an interesting one, right? And I'd love to unpack that more and kind of like get into the tactics of what emails are you actually sending to those people? They're known contacts to you,
Hmm.
so they're leads you've generated somehow. What is
Hmm.
that personalized content you're sending? Is it a sales approach? Is it more content you're giving them? Like, and then what's the conversion off the back of it?
Yeah. So the short answer is it's dependent on what they were trying to do. If we get more cues that they are closer to wanting to talk to a salesperson or further along in the buying journey, then we're going to try to open up that pathway for them. If they're still relatively early on in their buying journey, based again on their behavior, then we're going to try to help them discover more content. So, a very um, relevant example, a lot of folks come to HubSpot Academy, they sign up to take a course or a cert, and based on that and the other things they've done on the site, we reverse engineer what we think they are trying to do. So, Phil, if you engage with a bunch of content about the loop, we think, okay, he probably wants to know about the loop. Maybe he's trying to lead his business or his marketing department through this transition. We're going to use your title, we're going to use again your website, any of the information that we can glean. Um, and then the email might say something like, "Hey Phil, thank you for signing up to take such and such course. We have a few more materials that you might be interested in based on, the challenges that we think your business might be going through." All of this, is going to be as specific as possible. And then it'll share that information with you. Or if you did that and then you went and looked at Marketing Hub pricing, we might say, and we have a salesperson who could walk through some of these challenges and how businesses like yours have approached it. Here are some times you could talk to them. So
Yeah,
it's personalized, not just in terms of the content, but in terms of what pathways they can go down next.
yeah. Email's a really good channel for experimenting in this era, isn't it? 'Cause it's one of the places where we can use AI to personalize to the individual at the speed required, and so it means that you have the ability to actually implement, I think, where everything is headed, which is personalization at the individual level. Um,
Hmm.
but for the time being, that can't be done everywhere quite yet. But email, it's possible. Um, Sticking on things that I think, well, they confused me initially, so therefore they might confuse other people. I think I've got my head around it now, but nevertheless, just because I think it is worth asking. Just like, I think people will be like, well, which comes first, tailor or amplify? I think the other question that might be on people's minds is, where in the loop do we create content? Um,
Mm.
and my answer is everywhere. But I'm interested in your answer, to see whether it's the same answer, or you come at it from a different perspective.
I think of creating content in Express, but I agree with you that it doesn't have to be so locked into Express. Like if you think about Amplify as amplifying through trusted sources, you might be taking a piece of content that you created and sharing it on LinkedIn, which in and of itself is content creation. Um, and so I think it can be flexible, but I primarily see that living in Express.
Okay, that's really interesting, actually. And I totally understand and see that. So, majority of content creation is happening at the express stage, um, as a product of training AI on your personas, your ICP, your tone of voice, your product, your position, and then the bulk of your content creation taking place at that stage, and then you're going to be tailoring that content and amplifying that content, which may transform that content a little bit or a lot, or might even call for completely new content for specific requirements. Understood. Good to know.
Mm. I have another area that I'd love to dive into with you because one of our core offerings is websites
Mhm.
on HubSpot. And I'd love to know your thinking of like where the website fits into the loop and how the behaviors and everything influence the website and how we should be thinking about it in terms of the loop.
Yeah. Well, I think something really interesting is happening to the website in that your customers are visiting it later in their journey than ever before. So it used to be one of their first touch points with your brand. Now I think it's some of the last. And so that means a few things for the website. First, I think that it needs to be um, much more uh, flexible on kind of, or not much more flexible, much more focused on, okay, someone coming here is high intent. And so, how do we help them take that next step as quickly as possible? And what we've seen is this is specific to visitors coming from answer engines, but I think it's indicative of the larger trend. They are up to 3 times higher they have up to 3 times higher conversion rates than visitors from traditional channels because they've done so much education with an LLM before they say, okay, and now I'm going to go to HubSpot.com and learn a little more. And so the website moves into much more of a, okay, you're almost sales ready or you're almost marketing QL ready. Like, let's make sure that there's as little friction as possible to getting you to that point, and let's make sure that there's all the information that you're looking for at that stage. I think the website is also evolving more and more into a tool to educate buyers through LLMs, which is kind of linked to the first point. So typically we think of a blog post or a product page as being there for a human to read and understand. But more and more, if the human is getting that information via an answer engine, you need to think about the answer engine as your first audience member. And that's different than a human because an answer engine does not care about UX or design. It very much cares about how things are structured, how
Mm.
readable things are, how clear and concise and semantically complete your content is, how well organized your site is. Um, you can't forget about the human because the human will probably land there too, but you need to be thinking about this distinct other audience that will inform whether a human ever makes it to those pages.
Yeah, I there's a sort of side effect of the way AI is changing how buyers research and buy that I think actually kind of correlates to that a little bit. I'm just trying to think how to form this, but in some way, I think AI, the way that it synthesizes information and the way that it refocuses our website visits on high intent leads is actually ushering in like a re-examining of what's best for the buyer and has always been, and it's helping marketers get out of their own way a little bit by like optimizing for the buyer in the experience. We
Mhm.
specialize in websites on HubSpot. It's one of our areas of strength. And we're always focusing on how can we make the user experience better for people who want to take
Mhm.
action. And actually, you get a lot of resistance. You get a lot of marketers and marketing teams that have got other priorities and other objectives and that
Mhm.
can get in the way of that. And if we think about the evolution from blog content to answer engine content, you know, complete passages that make sense on their own and aren't interlinked and filled with fluff and stuff like that. It's actually like good. It's a healthy way to approach it and kind of always has been. So I think there's some real benefits to the way we think about our go to market as a result of how AI is changing how people experience us, actually.
Yeah, I think it also raises the bar for what people expect out of their experience. In terms of the way HubSpot is evolving our own site is to be much more conversational because if you are coming from an answer engine and then you hit a static non-interactive site
Mhm.
that's a little bit like whoa, did my experience just take a big step down? Yeah, I liked what I had and now I'm here. And obviously, we don't want your experience to feel that way. We want your experience to feel, very concierge esque, and far more personalized too, because that is exactly how your experience will be in an answer engine. So I definitely think it's a really good forcing function, Phil, to your point, to say,
Mm,
okay, how do we level up this experience for the customer?
yeah, and HubSpot Customer Agent in particular is a really shining example of AI in action in the HubSpot platform. It just does such a good job of continuing that conversational experience where relevant, and and the lift that's required to get it operating is so little.
Yeah.
We've seen such phenomenal results from very simple, very quick training. You don't really need to train it at all. Just provide the source material and away it goes. Very impressive.
Yeah, it's incredible, and that if I can, close the loop, the that work came from the work that our internal marketing team was doing and the early success that we were having with a similar agent on our website. We've developed a very close partnership with product. We've always had a close partnership with product. I mean, we're patient zero for a lot of product features, but more and more we started to say, "Hey, we are trying to do this thing. We need to do this thing, and then it's working, and how can we build this for customers as quickly as possible?" So that's part of our loop, like marketing learnings that we then feed back to product so they can try to productize.
Mm. Um, I there is one topic in particular, AEO, that I'm inventing a new phrase here, triple click into. But obviously, you know, this podcast is focused on the loop primarily. So before we do that, I just wanted to know if there was any other area of the loop that we should be talking about in more detail, or if we do a triple click.
Well, I think if we go into AEO, which I think, yeah, is where you're leading, that is a big part of Amplify. It's not the only tactic in Amplify. Amplify is about being wherever your buyers are, which can include creators, social, and obviously these answer engines. So I'm glad we're spending some time there because I don't know if I ever said my favorite phase. I flip
Oh
flop
yeah.
between and amplify.
Interesting. Yeah,
Yeah.
because AEO is such I mean, it's the topic at the forefront of most marketers' minds right now.
Yeah.
And like I'm a big fan of marketing against the grain. So, you've done a few episodes with Kip and Kieran on that. They're speaking about AEO every other episode. We spoke
Yeah.
about it a little bit when we met at Inbound. And I think HubSpot being early movers in almost everything and having, data and volume behind you, I think it would be interesting to just understand from your perspective what HubSpot are doing right now to be found in large language models, and how can other businesses take similar approaches, or just, yeah, the approach, I suppose.
Yeah. Well, the good news is that I am currently working on an AEO playbook for the loop, which we hope to share in the coming months. That tries to be a really prescriptive and actionable playbook for all the different steps you need to take because it is quite a new motion. Um, I group the tactics into 3 different buckets: content, technical or structure, and offsite. And they are all equally important. And this is right now like a 45-page doc. So I'm not going to try to go super in depth, but at a high level, what we are doing on the content side is we are creating hyper specific pages that talk about our personas, um, use cases and industries and how HubSpot applies in a conversational format that really matches how people are searching answer engines. And so in the old world, if we were publishing the ultimate guide to email marketing, now we are publishing, you know, how to do email marketing if you work at a 200-person logistics company in New Jersey,
Wow.
and making sure that content is as rich and helpful as possible using the insights we've collected from customers that fit that profile, insights from our sales and customer success teams, basically any data or insights that we can use to make that super valuable and relevant for that persona. Um, on the technical side of things, then we've really reverse engineered what answer engines are looking for when they find, read, and cite a piece of content.
Mm.
And we've already talked about some of those principles, but it's it's easy to read. It doesn't use jargon. It's highly structured. Um, the answer is not buried. The answer is right up front and easy to find. And if you are looking at one specific passage in the page, that passage should make sense in isolation. So I think yes, it really is. I think a breath of fresh air for a lot of human readers too, because they can just find the answer really easily, and that's what we're all looking for. And then the offsite tactics, these are probably, I think, the hardest to implement uh, because they really require like an approach to PR and brand building that a lot of folks on marketing have invested less in my experience. Um, but that looks like building as many positive mentions of your brand across the web as possible, concentrating on the areas that we know answer engines and humans spend a lot of time, like Reddit, LinkedIn, YouTube, Quora, review sites. Obviously, it's going to be a little different depending on whether you're a B2B or a B2C brand, but it's figuring out where those places are and then deploying your advocates, deploying partners to say as many authentic, positive things uh, um, about your products or services as possible.
Ooh, right. I've got a lot of notes in there. Phil, do you wanna rattle through anything first?
I've got a couple of questions. One, I think on the subject of content, in order to do its job for you or for any of us, that content has got to be on your website or at least at your domain and indexable, right? Because in order to surface and retrieve and synthesize that content into an answer, either Bing's index or Google's index or someone's index has got to be able to find that content. So it sounds to me like the content you're creating that's very niche, we can go and find it and
Mhm.
look at it and compare it with what we're creating and learn from the best.
Yeah, you absolutely could. We can actually let me check on whether we can the content is findable. Um, but we're also trying to maintain a little bit of our secret sauce.
Hmm.
So let me check and see if we can drop the link. Yeah. There's a you know what I'll show you that's super cool? So what this is a glossary of terms. Glossaries are not a new SEO tactic by any means, but the way that we have built this, I think, is new. These are all concepts that we know are relevant to Growth Gabby. And what we have done is we've created educational content, um, or explainers for each of these terms. And then we've also explained at every step of the way how it is relevant to HubSpot, the product. So, what this really does is this reinforces for an LLM or a human trying to better understand audience segmentation why and how HubSpot can help them do audience segmentation. And I think that this really reinvents the idea of high level educational content. We still want to create that. We still know people are looking for more education around these things.
It is fascinating how the the evolution of yeah AI content discovery is like redistributing value and not only across new things like the SEO glossary, like you say, not a new concept.
It's such an
No,
old concept, isn't it? It's crazy, like yeah.
it's the execution that has changed and the why that's changed.
So this is one of the
Um,
pages, is it, Asia?
Sorry. Yeah, this is one of the
Yeah.
pages. Yeah. I didn't realize that, we wouldn't follow me as I clicked. But yeah, I think I have to give, a credit to my team members, Bradley Sanders, Victor Pan, and Amanda Copen for leading the ideation and execution of this project. It's been a really interesting one. I'll also share something that didn't work, in the spirit of celebrating failure and
Oh, yes. We love failure.
yeah, yeah. Soak it up. Eat it for breakfast. Um, okay, so one of the early things that y'all might have heard buzz around was that LinkedIn Pulse articles were getting a
Yeah.
disproportionate number of citations. Yeah, in Google AI overviews and AI mode, particularly. We saw the data about LinkedIn Pulse citations, and we decided to test it by publishing a series of articles under employee or on employee profiles that some of them were explicitly about the product, some of them were more classic, what is how do you do email marketing
Mm.
successfully in 2025 with mentions of the product. Um, and it didn't work at all.
Right.
Like, we got very few citations to that content. And my first thought was, okay, the algorithm has changed. But we are still seeing new content be published that is getting new LinkedIn Pulse content that's getting citations. Um, and we can't find any obvious clues around how much engagement the content gets, who posts it, how old it is, what the topic is. Like there aren't any obvious um, data points about what will and won't work. And so we're gonna try one more time. We're gonna take a very different approach to the experiment, and then if that doesn't work, we're gonna move on and say, all right, maybe this does work for what some brands, but not for us, and we gotta call it and try new techniques.
Yeah. Um, a question around all of that content, all those pages, like the glossary that you just shared. That is a lot of content, and I'm I'm staggered, like, by the amount of volume that you must be creating to cover, like email marketing in New Jersey for manufacturing companies. Like the
Mm.
level down and down and down that goes is crazy. I'm interested to know how much AI you're using to create this content. I imagine a lot, and how much human time goes into creating it, proofing it, publishing it, if any.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Definitely human review goes into it, and that's very intentional. A, because we're talking about the product, and so accuracy is very important. The whole idea is to boost visibility in answer engines and improve the accuracy
Yeah.
of those mentions. And so if we're feeding if we're using AI and there's no human, then we're just feeding incorrect information to more AI. And that's definitely a cycle we don't want to be in. Um, so the process is we have a few of these projects running at any given time, and we've developed a pretty good framework for them, which is identify all the different data points that we want to bring in, whether internal or external. So that could be for some of these personalization projects, it's okay, we really want to use a contact's website, we really want to use their behavioral data, or it could be we really want to use the competitive battle cards that our competitive intelligence team have created. We want to use CRM insights from these X industries, etc. So mapping out the data points. Then we have um, basically a sprint between the growth team, my team, and the dev team to really refine and perfect the prompts. We have quite extensive quality tests that we run the sample content outputs through. So we want to make sure that if a human reads it, if Googlebot reads it, and these LLM bots read it, all three of those audiences would be like, good content, in the most simple terms. And then, uh, we do batched publication, and so we would review each batch to make sure, again, accuracy is there, quality is
Mm.
there, and uniqueness is there because this goes into quality, but to your point, it's a lot of content, and we are not trying to flood the web or answer engines with very similar content. What we are trying to do is create ultra tailored content for each of our unique personas and use cases and industries.
So just wrapping this episode up here, post episode, because we actually had to wrap up the recording pretty quickly, and I just wanted to kind of summarize that episode for everyone. Hopefully that was really insightful, really actionable, and a great episode for everyone to listen to. I know I have, 3 pages here full of notes from Asia, some great examples to go away and start implementing for Blend right now and see how we can implement some of that for customers too. So yeah, big thanks to Asia for coming on. It was a fantastic episode, and we're really looking forward to starting to test more things out around loop marketing, AEO, as we are now, and bringing you all the insights as always. So big thanks to Asia. Thank you for tuning into this episode of Demand Decoded, and we will catch you next time. Bye, everyone. This episode of Demand Decoded was brought to you by Blend. We help B2B technology companies grow through strategic, creative, and technical expertise, bringing you the capabilities you need to drive demand and turn it into real revenue impact for your business. If you enjoyed this episode, follow Demand Decoded on your favorite podcast platform, leave us a quick review, and we'll see you next time with more insight to help you grow.